Sometimes a topic circulates and you roll your eyes, and then other times a topic circulates and you're glad to see it again, because it never really loses its importance. For me, this is one of them, and the topic that I'm talking about is the effect of the detailed player backstory. Now, often this problem will arise when someone wonders aloud, which do you prefer, characters to write a backstory or not, or which is better, the short, one-line character description or the detailed 4-page backstory, which one's better? For me, I feel that those answers are too clearly rooted in the culture of play around your table to really be answerable in a satisfying way. But the part of the question which does need to be explored is, what is the content of that backstory? Because for me, that's where people run into trouble, not with the degree of backstory or even the amount of detail, but the kind of details, the type of content that's included. So what do I mean by that? A few years ago, 2 or 3, I wrote a blog entry called Character Poisoning. And I feel that title sums up pretty clearly what I'm getting at. I was running a MechWarrior campaign at that time using a Time of War, and it was in play by email. So little issues like this were not easy to spot right away. They became apparent over a far longer period of time than would be normal around the table. But up here, they did. And this trap is not one that's just for beginner players. Experienced players, very experienced players, can fall prey to it as well, can fall prey to character poisoning. And what I mean is that the details, the content that went into expressing their character concept prior to play was grander than who they were actually portraying their character as, and the way that mechanically their character was going to be represented. Because we were playing a new game, the players couldn't really be sure prior to play what effect certain skills would have, or how effective they would be in their areas of interest and their areas of expertise. But their backstories demanded a certain level of performance. Also, in like fantasy games, when you tie in fate, tie in the brutal orphaning of the character, or all these grandiose things, there's not a lot of room for that if more than one person is playing. This is a conflict between fiction writing and the collaborative storytelling that most of us are trying to go for. And it doesn't matter if you have a GM who's in charge of the story, or you have a group who's in charge of laying the foundation for the beginning of the story. This will always be true. What kind of content are you putting into your backstory? The type of content that I feel works best is where you explain who the character is, where you explain their reactions to things, their outlooks on life, where you shy away from what they have done. In fact, you don't go anywhere near what they have done, because really, in most games, we're starting at the beginning of the story. And if your character already has a complete story by the time play starts, you're just making problems for the other people. That's how I feel. Character poisoning. It's where this fully fleshed idea gets dropped into the game world. It doesn't quite fit, and so the player and the game master end up rubbing each other the wrong way. Not at all on purpose, purely as a result of the lack of communication that went into creating this backstory. It could be a great backstory, but with the 3 or 4 or 5 other players, it just generates friction. It generates the desire to drag the camera in places it doesn't belong. Right? Also, it tends to create unreasonable expectations about how your character should be treated. And really, this was the impetus for the character poisoning article, was that the player feels like their character is not being perceived properly. They actually want to say, do you know who my character is? And they're not speaking to NPCs, they're speaking to the other players. I don't think my character would be treated this way, and I don't think people would talk to my character this way, and I think my character would be the one that would be chosen because of this detail I salted away in the backstory somewhere, rather than that character. It's problematic. It poisons the well of fun that the group is trying to draw from, and it comes up quite a bit. So, is a detailed character backstory useful? Of course. If nothing else, this is a measure of how invested your players are in the game. But like any other creative endeavor, it needs some kind of limits. It's not enough to say, okay, go home, create your character, and then I'll build the story around it sometimes. When you've got 5 people creating things independently, or even 3 people, there will be times where the fires of creation take them off in completely different directions, and that puts you as the game master in the role of saying, okay, all 3 of these characters are great, only 2 of them work together, this 3rd one needs to be redone. And that's also a big ball of no fun. So to avoid all of these things, establishing limits with the group about what kind of information needs to be in the backstory before people go away to start writing them saves everybody a lot of energy, preserves the inspiration and the fire that goes into character creation, and helps reduce problems down the road. Great question, as always.